Okay, today we're going to be solving and graphing inequalities. This is our second day of using that skill. This goes along with section 6.3 in your textbook. Some things you need to remember is that we solve these inequalities just as you would any other. Work outside in to the variable, and remember, if the variable is on both sides, you need to move it to one side only. Okay, the first problem, 9/5 c plus 32 is greater than negative 31. The first step is to subtract 32 because we want to get this fraction by itself. We end up with 9/5 c is greater than negative 63. Now, to undo this fraction, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, 5/9, and what we do to one side we have to do to the other side. Okay, the fractions cancel one another out, and we end up with c is greater than negative 35. And to graph that, we're going to put negative 35 at the middle of our graph. And because it says c is greater than negative 35, we're going to put an open circle over negative 35. Since negative 35 is not part of the solution set, and our arrow goes towards the numbers that are greater than negative 35. For our second example, the first thing we want to do is get our variables together. To do that, we're going to subtract 3n from both sides. We end up with negative 18 is greater than or equal to 2n plus 21. Then I want to get 2n by itself, and I'll do that by subtracting 21 from both sides. And I end up with negative 39 is greater than or equal to 2n. Next step to get the variable by itself is to divide by 2 on both sides, and I end up with negative 19.5 is greater than or equal to n. Now, on both of these examples, we did not need to flip our inequality sign because we did not multiply or divide by a negative number, and that's something you need to be thinking about when you're solving these. Remember, the only time that we reverse our inequality sign is if we multiply or divide by a negative number. And to graph this, when I'm going to put negative 19.5 at the center, and I'm going to put a circle over that. And because the sign says negative 19.5 is greater than or equal to n, I have to close in my circle because that shows that it includes that value. And since negative 19.5 is greater than or equal to n can only be the numbers to the left side of negative 19.5. So I put my arrow to the left. All right, for this example, we need to distribute the negative 2 into the terms inside the parentheses. So we end up with 3x. Negative 2 times 8x gives me negative 16x. Negative 2 times negative 9 gives me positive 18 is greater than 3. The first thing that I want to do here is combine my like terms, 3x and negative 16x, and I end up with negative 13x plus 18 is greater than 3. And my next step is to get that variable by itself. In order to do that, I have to subtract 18. And I end up with negative 13x is greater than negative 15. Last step is to get the variable by itself, so I divide by negative 13 on both sides. And since I'm dividing by a negative, I need to remember to flip my sign. Okay? And I end up with x is less than 15 thirteenths. And remember, since we have a negative divided by a negative, they cancel one another out, and we end up with positive 15 thirteenths. I'm going to figure that 15 thirteenths is close to 1, so I'll put 1 at the center of my graph. Okay, and I'm going to estimate that 15 thirteenths is just a little bit larger than 1. So I'm going to put my circle right here. And since x is less than 15 thirteenths, it does not include 15 thirteenths. And x is less than 15 thirteenths, so my arrow has to go to the left to show that my solution can be anything that is less than 15 thirteenths. All right, our last example is got a fraction in it. It's 2f minus 3 divided by 5 is greater than or equal to 7. First thing I need to do in this before I can get to my variable is undo the fraction. To undo division, we're going to multiply by the denominator. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5. Okay, and I can put 5 over 1 here if I want to do that. These two cancel one another out, so I end up with 2f minus 3 is greater than or equal to 35. All right. My next step to get that variable by itself is to add 3 to both sides, and I end up with 2f is greater than or equal to 38. And my last step is to divide both sides by 2, and I end up with f is greater than or equal to 19. On this one, since I divided by a positive, I don't need to do anything to my inequality sign. I'm going to put 19 at the center of my graph. And I'm going to put a circle over that. And my circle needs to be closed because it says f is greater than or equal to 19, which means it includes 19. And my arrow is going to go to the right to show that it can be any value that's greater than 19 also. The thing that you must remember when you're solving inequalities, they're just like equations, except when you multiply or divide by a negative value, then you need to flip the sign.